Let me get it together today. Hi, readers. It's Lori. Welcome back to my channel, Books, Ink, and Paper, or welcome if this is your first time and you're a new subscriber or a viewer. I'm happy that you are watching today. And thanks for all of you for your patience as I am getting this out a little bit later than normal, but this is my February reading wrap-up video. I know. Uh, I'm not even going to say why. It just is what it is, and everything's good. I had a really good reading month in February. I was really happy with it. I am really hopeful that this trend continues because the number of books I want to read far exceeds sometimes the time that I have to be able to read them. Let's talk about what my stats look like, which I'm really happy with. So I read 8 books in the month of February. That was a total of 2,925 pages, working it out, even though a couple of them were audio. My top moods of the books I was reading were mysterious, followed by emotional, and my least kind of rating that I gave these books was hopeful and challenging. So many of them were not particularly hopeful, but not very often did I feel challenged by them. I had a medium-paced reading month, but the book I read the fastest was a paperback that I picked up and read in one day when I was sick. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But those cozies are usually pretty fast. They were all fiction this month, no nonfiction for me. I need to get back to that rhythm because you know I have a pretty hefty nonfiction reading goal for this year. Okay, of the books I read, 3 were thrillers, 3 were mysteries, 2 were romance. I'm not going to say anymore that I don't read a lot of romance because that's not any longer true. I've brought it back in, it snuck back in on me. Literary fiction, 1, and historical fiction, 1. I read 75% of the books in print version and 25% in audio. My average rating was 4.11. I had 2 5-star ratings this month, and my peak reading days were the days when I was sick. Okay, so that's enough about stats. Let's talk about what I read and the order in which I read them, which means I need to open up my bullet journal again. The first book I finished, and I'm really proud of this, not just because I finished this one quickly, but also because I'm getting my book of the month books that I own down, except I got a few this month, more than one, but it's okay. That was The Fury by Alex Michaelides. Let me move my finger so you can see. This cover is very interesting, right? The eye, the beach. Uh, this is my second read by this author. This was one of my 5-star reads, so I really did feel like this one was solid. I know not everybody did and does, and not everyone is a fan, but I really do love this trope. It was fast-paced for me. I appreciated the somewhat unreliable narrator and the backstory and some of the things that really unfolded along the way in a pacing that I thought was just right. It was just what I was looking for. I loved these kind of really highly flawed characters. So the Lana Farrar is an ex-movie star, that is her name, and she has a Greek island that she owns property on. I think she owns a whole island, and they go there now and again, she and her husband, she and her friends, just to kind of get away. And this time she calls together all of her friends and decides she really needs some time away from England and just, to relax on the beach. So the narrator is Elliot Chase. And I love the flap really kind of sets us up for you without telling you too much. This is a tale of murder. Or maybe that's not quite true. At its heart, it's a love story, isn't it? And then he tells you about this experience where they're going away. And then he says, I tell you this because you may think you know this story. You You probably read about it at the time. It caused a real stir in the tabloids, if you remember. It had all the necessary ingredients for a press sensation, a celebrity, a private island cut off by the wind, and a murder. But who am I? My name is Elliot Chase, and I'm going to tell you a story unlike one that you've ever heard. I just kind of love that. Doesn't give too much away, does set up the scenery for you, does set up the premise, the trope. I really loved it. I highly recommend it. And it wasn't terribly long. It was 298 pages. So next I read 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. She's a new author to me. Won't be the last time I read something by this author. I actually discovered this book because another booktuber, Becca, at Becca's Books and Bujo, was reading it. And it just seems like I was in the mood for this kind of romance. However, this is not your typical light, tropey romance at all. This is heavy, hard hitting, gritty, sometimes very uncomfortable, pretty high on the steam meter, and very well written. And I think I may have mentioned this before, but while I was reading this, I was also listening to a podcast of a live book festival chat with this author and a few others. And she really talked about her experiences as a writer, as a Black woman, and trying to put these stories forward that are really rooted in real life experiences and really feel like you are with characters that have depth and soul and heart and pain. So don't expect this to be lighthearted. Do expect it, though, to be an amazing read. Eva Mercy is the name of the author, and she writes erotic fiction. She's very famous for it, and people just love her work. And she's invited to speak at an event, some sort of an award ceremony, as I recall. And another author comes in, and his name is Shane, and they banter back and forth a bit about their love for each other's novels. Turns out, though, that Eva and Shane have met before when they were young, and they had literally 7 days in June together. And this is not oh, that was cozy. Those 7 days in June were really intense in a multitude of ways. So again, I want to just impress upon you that there are some trigger warnings in this. So we go back and forth from the time when they were young and the time where they are now, and the struggles that they're both feeling about being an author, about being successful, about being seen and heard, but also the struggles that they're both having with that relationship and where they are now and where they want to be, essentially. It's not a tidy, wrapped up in a bow kind of a thing. Okay, sensitivity warnings. I'm trying not to use the word trigger anymore. So, sensitivity warnings to sexual assault, violence, terrible parents, drug and alcohol abuse. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. But it was so good. And it made me really want to read the book that she currently has on the shelves as I'm seeing when I go to the bookstore, which is A Love Song for Ricky Wilde. And that just came out this year. So I would really like to get that one on my shelves or at least borrow it. I did borrow this one from my library on audio. I really enjoyed the narrators. I really enjoyed the way she paced it out. I really love her writing. You might think I gave it 5 stars. I didn't. I gave it 4 stars, but it probably was more like a 4.5 for me. It was really, really good. I guess when I finished it, it was so heavy. It had a heavy, heavy weight to it, and all through it did. So it may have been that, but that shouldn't have, I maybe would read it again just to kind of see if my experience with it changed. Then I read New Orleans Morning by Julie Smith, which was our group read for the Mardi Gras Readathon. There is a live event that is, I think, on my channel that you can watch if you want to hear our thoughts about it. There are some spoilers in that wrap up, but the group consensus was that this novel was okay. It was good. We enjoyed reading it. There were parts of it that we liked a lot more than others. I ended up giving this a 3 star rating. This is her first in the Skip Langdon series. It is set in New Orleans. It is set on Mardi Gras Day where someone is murdered in a parade. and Skip Langdon, who is just a police officer. She's just kind of trying to control traffic and people on the parade day. But because she knows the guy who was murdered and she saw some of the things that occurred, she's added to the investigative team of this particular murder. And she, kind of develops herself along the way. I guess the challenges I had with it were that sometimes the dialogue was very stilted. It was almost like I've said before, this is like a love song to New Orleans, and it really is because she adds in everything that you could possibly want to kind of think about and feel like New Orleans is. And also sometimes that was a little bit of overkill. It was almost like she was saying, hey, look, here's this cathedral. Hey, look, here's this restaurant. Hey, look, here's this place. It was a lot. And there was some things that just were, in the end, the wrap up, I just was not happy with the way that it ended. But I'm glad I read it. I don't think I will continue in this series, but I'm grateful that we all read it together and we had a very robust discussion about it. So that was really great fun. Book number 4, Thank You for Listening by Julia Whalen, which I purchased with one of my Libro.fm credits. I adore Julia Whalen as an audiobook narrator. I now adore Julia Whalen as an author as well. This was very meta because it is about an audiobook narrator who is struggling with the work that she does and with feeling like she's relevant. She had narrated romance books for a long, long time and felt like they were just becoming cheesy and ridiculous. So she was trying to continue to work in the field, but narrate some maybe more deep content, maybe some content with a little more, kind of weight and teeth to it. But a woman that she knew who was in the romance writing industry passes away, and in her will, she specifically asks if she will co-narrate this new book that she's written with another audiobook narrator that this woman's had a relationship with. So she agrees, first of all, very reluctantly, but second of all, because it's a pretty good gig financially for her and she could really use the money. So this follows their banter back and forth, at first just via text and communicating how they're going to handle different things. And then it also continues throughout as they go deeper and deeper into somewhat of a relationship in this text messaging framework and in sharing this audiobook narration. It is not, however, just about that story. It is also about her experience with her mom and with dementia and with her family, her father, just her life in general and how she's feeling about herself. And is this kind of the work that she wants to do forever? So it had a little bit more depth than your typical romance as well. So it was emotional, funny, lighthearted, a little darker hearted when the issues with memory loss and dementia started to arise. It may have only been sensitive on my end because I experienced that with more than one family member. However, that is a sensitivity warning, I would say, for others. It's a little steamy, but not high on the steam level. And I would say it's not as sort of it's not tropey, but it is tropey, if that makes sense. It is a little tropey, but it's not also tropey. So there's that. I'll just give you that. Thank you for listening. No, seriously. This is Thank You for Listening by Julia Whalen, and I gave it 4.25 stars. I was so delighted because I was able to get into the BookTube Besties Retreat for the first time ever. I have wanted to for a few times now, and I just never got in before they closed it off. I think the maximum was 50 people, and I got the last spot. I kid you not. I can thank Kat at Kat's Novel Adventures for this because I was in a movie theater with my partner and we were just coming out of the theater and she texted me and said, hey, you need to register for the BookTube Besties Retreat. It's open right now, and you know they go fast. And I immediately sat down in the theater in the lobby and registered myself so that I could get in. I was so delighted to be able to do this. It was the best weekend experience, and I can't recommend it highly enough, except I don't want you to sign up because I want to be able to go again next time it happens. I met some amazing readers, some great booktubers as well, people that I didn't know about before, and it just was so, so, so much fun. However, the group read for this BookTube Besties retreat was The Golden Spoon by Jessa Maxwell, and I had already read The Golden Spoon actually when it first came out, like immediately upon release. I got it from the library and I read it. It had been a while. It was last year, I think. So I finished it 10 months ago, according to Goodreads, but it did come out in March of 2023. The Golden Spoon is perfect, really, in sort of something that would catch my eye. It's a murder mystery and it's isolated, closed circle, also, things I love. But because it's about a baking show and the contestants on this baking show, I'm all in. And I definitely enjoyed this book very much. I think I actually enjoyed it more the second time around. I think the first time I probably flew through it and I missed some things. But the second time around, I can tell you that so it doesn't matter. This is not going to be a spoiler, but I can tell you there's a lot of foreshadowing and there's a lot of character development that I maybe didn't appreciate as much the first time because I was kind of rushing through it. But it follows a bunch of people who are accepted for this baking challenge, which has been going on for a long, long time. The woman who hosts it has this grand castle location, and she has these folks come from all over and they bake, and then of course somebody wins the championship. But two things happen this time. One, they've added another co-host to her show and she's not particularly happy about that. And two, someone is murdered. So that's all I'm going to tell you, except that the second time I listened to it, the first time I read it physically, and I don't know. I think either one worked, but each character has their own voice, their own narrator. So I like that too in an audiobook. When there's a lot of people, I think it's nice to separate them by your brain being able to identify who they are by their voice. And did I tell you I gave it 3 stars this time? I think I gave it the same rating as I did before. And then I read The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon. This was one of my anticipated reads in December. New author to me, but I was hearing so much buzz about her as well as about this particular book. I put it on hold in December with my library, and it had already been held by a number of people. So from December to February, I waited very, very patiently. And I started reading it. And I honestly started reading it very close to the day it was due, just because I had other stuff I was finishing and I had the BookTube Besties retreat and some other things. I didn't get to it as soon as I wanted to. So when I did get to it, I really needed to accelerate the reading because I was close to the deadline. And even had I not had that experience, I probably would have flown through it. This was my second 5-star read of the month, my only historical fiction read. I loved it so much, I could hardly put it down. And in fact, my partner was watching me and noticing what I was feeling. And, I was crying at times and I was shutting it quickly at times. And I was like really feeling all the things. And I kept saying, this is such a really good book. This is a really, really good book. I have to admit, we kept it a couple of extra days so she could read it as well. And she enjoyed it as much as I did too. And we don't always have the same reading taste, she and I. Martha Ballard is the main character of this novel, and this is set in the late 1700s, and she is a midwife. She also does some other doctoring in this community in the Kennebec River area in Maine. She's married, she has several children. You hear about her life, her story. They do flash back to parts of her younger life and some of the things that happened to her. Also present time, there's a man that's found in the river, dead, frozen, and she's certain, and she's also sort of the coroner in this community. She's certain that this man has been murdered, whereas there's another doctor in the community that is a man, and he is certain that he was not murdered. And so there is this, the beginning of it sort of launches this investigation, but also this tension between her and this other guy. Meanwhile, she's delivering all these babies and she's having all these experiences. It's a lot. It's a great plot. It's fast paced. It was, at least for us. And I'm so grateful that I read it. I do want to read other books by Ariel Lawhorn now. It's not an author that I'm not familiar with. In fact, I own one of them that I got once at a library book sale or somewhere. And I can tell you which one that one is because I just picked it up and looked at it the other day and thought, oh, I need to look at this. The Wife, the Maid, and the Mistress is the one that I have. And that one came out in 2014. She's a pretty popular author. There are some sensitivity warnings for the frozen river as well. Sexual assault, childbirth challenges, including miscarriage. I don't want to sugarcoat this one either. It is emotionally pretty intense, and yet it was worth the read for me. But again, reader, know yourself, know your sensitivity levels, and just care for yourself. You can imagine that after that, I needed a little bit of a palate cleanser. So I finished Homicide in Hardcover by Kate Carlisle. This is the first in the series. I had a couple of these on my shelf, but I never had purchased the first one. So I did that, I think, last month. And I enjoyed this. It is a bibliophile mystery. This one is about a bookbinder named Brooklyn. She's pretty dedicated to this work. She's been trained by someone who was masterful at this. And of course, a murder occurs and she is kind of in the thick of it. There's a British detective that gets involved, and he's not particularly crazy about Brooklyn and about what she's telling him and thinks there might be more. And it's, again, just a cozy little mystery, book one, in a small community where I'm sure people continue to be murdered over and over and over again, which, how does that happen? What are the odds? But I enjoyed it. I will continue with that series and probably start on book two, maybe this month, because Murder Mystery Madness month, right? Is March. March Murder Mystery Madness. And then the last one, Erasure by Percival Everett. I listened to this one as well. It was featured in my library on Hoopla. It came out in 2011. I had not heard of this author at all until I found out that the movie American Fiction was based on this book by Percival Everett. Literary fiction, probably not widely consumed. Here, hence the irony, because this book is about an author, a Black author, who has published a number of titles that are literary fiction, and he's really just struggling to sell these books. At the same time, a Black woman publishes a book called We's Lived in the Ghetto. She is an overnight sensation, can't sell enough books, and she is driving him crazy because the way that she wrote the book, how Black people live and speak, feels like it degrades their culture and degrades fiction. And he's just really, really about this book and this particular woman. Meanwhile, though, he's also supporting and struggling with the support of his mom, who also has a dementia disease. So this came up more than once this month. And so sensitivity warnings for that again. But he's also trying to kind of make peace with his sister and brother and kind of maybe work together to care for their mom. But then he just on a whim one day, because he's angry and maybe he's had a little bit of wine, he writes a book called My Pathology. And he writes it under the synonym Stag R. Lee. Hilarious, right? He's just putting this forward as like, here's how ridiculous this choice to write fiction about Black people in this way feels to me. His editor says, you want me to shop it around? And he, on a whim, I guess, says, yeah, let's see what happens. And it's immediately picked up and immediately soars. And he now struggles with the fact that this book that he wrote in a ridiculous, sarcastic moment could end up giving him the money he needs to be able to take care of his mom. But I will say that this is a thoughtful, imaginative novel that is filled with challenge and moments where you're just like cringing about perception and language and circumstances and and opinions and beliefs and culture and racism and oh, it's just so amazingly done. So I will say we did watch the movie. I wanted to read the book first, did watch the adaptation of it, liked it just as much. It does depart a little bit from the book, but not terribly. This will not be my last read by Percival Everett. And in fact, I just featured James as one of my most anticipated. So I am trying to get my hands on James in a way that works for me. Yeah, I can't wait to read more by this author. And it's kind of also amusing to discover that probably his book sales for this particular book have elevated because of this particular book, and it was nominated for an Oscar for the adaptation. So the director is Cord Jefferson. He actually spoke at on a Jon Stewart Daily Show. Jon Stewart is back, if you didn't know, but only on Mondays, I think. Anyway, he was there. He interviewed him. He started talking about this. I was like, I have to read this book. I have to read this book. I have to watch this movie. And indeed, I loved it. And it won the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay. So he was able to accept that Oscar. And I think Percival Everett helped to write the screenplay. And bam. So that one was a 4-star read for me. It was difficult at times. The reason it was 4 stars will be evident to you if you listen to it or read it. He goes off on these little tangents that are hard to understand sometimes. It's a very complex read at times because it goes off into these other like fugue moments where somebody else and something else is happening. It's great though. I love it. It just sometimes was a little bit like so confusing. It would just kind of take me out of the rest of the book. But I absolutely, absolutely loved it. And if you like a book within a book, his book, My Pathology, is part of the read too. So you're getting not only his story, but you're actually reading the book that he wrote. And mm, 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 mm. Good job. Good job. Good reading month for me. So thanks for watching. Thanks for putting up with my enthusiasm and my sensitivity warnings and all of these things as I get back in the groove of recording and posting content. I appreciate all of you so much. I hope you had a good reading month in February too. Tell me about it if you want in the comments. Tell me which one of these books you may have read, which ones kind of stand out as interesting to you. I know there are a lot of Ariel Lawhon fans out there, and the Frozen River is getting a lot of buzz in my social media areas. So I'm pretty sure a lot of people I know have finished that. But do let me know what your experience was like. Thanks again for being a fan and being in my community and being patient with me as I navigate life and work and books. And as always, happy reading. Bye.